Happy Monday. Okay, so first of all, Tara and I were just talking about this crazy energy. I don't know if everyone knows there was the partial solar eclipse, we had the new moon, spring equinox, solar storms. So if anyone's been feeling emotional or all over the place or weird things are happening, I'm telling you there's something in the air right now. So
Yep.
yeah, but let's dive into what's going on right now in politics. So I have been looking at RFK Jr., and I'll tell you why in a second, but there's some more news coming out, which is he is cutting 10,000 jobs at HHS, which is around 20% of their workforce. So he's letting go of 3,500 people from the FDA, 90 from NIH, and then 2,400 from the CDC. And he made it clear these aren't positions where they are inspecting products for safety. They're just kind of extra, positions like trimming the fat. And he said that over half of their employees don't go into work every day, which is wild to me. And there are hundreds of communication departments. Again, wild. How do you have hundreds of communications departments? So he said that they're doing all of this to make HHS more efficient and effective. And they're merging their core functions into a new organization that's going to be called the Administration for Healthy America, or AHA. And he was talking about how America ranks last in health out of 40 developed nations, yet we spend more per patient per capita than any of them. And so when you look at like the last 4 years under the Biden administration, HHS funding increased by 40% and staffing increased by 20%. So staffing increased by 20%. He's now cutting 20%. So essentially, he's just eliminating the bloat that was added during COVID under the Biden administration. So for everyone that's up in arms about this, it's like, no, these people probably never should have been added in the first place. And I'm sure it's a lot of DEI hires, I would guess. But anyhow, the reason why I started looking into what he's doing lately is because Candace Owens is like on this conspiracy train about RFK. Have you heard about this?
No.
Oh my God. So she kind of took a break from politics and she's been following more like Hollywood stuff, like with Blake Lively and just all these other stories. Like through doing all of that, she ends up getting into this online battle with this woman from House and Habit, which is basically like a mommy blogger, but she's supposed to be a conservative, a Republican, all this, all this. And this woman wrote this scathing article about Candace Owens and has been like shit talking Candace Owens. So anyhow, Candace Owens like goes down this rabbit hole and finds out that this woman is friends with and working with the woman who RFK had that like sexting scandal with, where they were like having an affair via text message or something like that. And so now she has started this rumor that this woman has ties to Israel and that Israel is blackmailing RFK with this like sexual affair he had over text message. And that is the mole in the Trump administration that is doing all these weird things like adding people to Signal chats, which I think is so far-fetched. Like I was trying to follow what she was saying and it sounds like she's trying to connect dots that just aren't there. But it's like catching traction on TikTok. And now there's like a bunch of these conservative influencers that are talking about it. And they all think that RFK is compromised. And I just feel like, shut up. Like, shut up. Just let him get the poison out of our foods and leave it alone. Why are we bringing more negative publicity to someone who's trying to like make America healthy again?
I'm just wondering what happened with her. Like, because while you're talking, I'm like, you know what? I used to listen to her podcast back when she was part of what's his
Daily
name?
Wire.
Yeah, Daily Wire. And so you said she was like more on this conspiracy train. And I remember we were talking like a week or two ago about her conspiracy theories about Macron. So I
Hmm.
decided while you were talking, I was going to look up her podcast. And I'm looking at the headline, like the headlines, and it's all like, who's controlling RFK Jr., the JFK files, the conspiracy theorists were right. And I'm like, okay, I got to start listening to this show now.
Yeah. But like, I don't, I'm not really following it. Like, I feel like it's very far-fetched. And I just think like he's now starting to make headway. Just leave it alone. Like, why are you bringing all this negative publicity to it? All because of this mommy blogger. Like, the whole thing is just so bizarre, but TikTok it's like trending right now.
Yeah, we need RFK Jr. That was one of the things that we've talked about so many times that we were the most excited about with this Trump administration is getting him on board. So let's not fuck that up.
Yeah, exactly.
But you mentioned COVID, and I want to give an update on something because I think it was like maybe a week or two ago, I was talking about how the Government Accountability Office estimated that between 100 and 135 billion dollars was stolen in fraudulent COVID relief during the pandemic, and only like 5 billion of it has been recovered so far, and the statute of limitations was set to expire at the end of March. So the House approved a bill on March 12th that would have doubled the statute of limitations from 5 to 10 years, which would have given prosecutors until March of 2030 to keep moving forward with these cases. And there are literally thousands of pending cases, and there's more than 1,600 cases that are already open but were not charged yet. But guess what? The Senate did not vote on the bill. So Congress basically failed to approve an extension, and now all of these corrupt fucks who stole taxpayer money under the guise of COVID relief are going to face zero accountability because it's just too late to do anything about it. And the statute of limitations expired on March 27th, a couple days ago. And from everything that I read, Congress cannot retroactively change criminal liability for federal crimes. And the most insane part of all this to me is that up to 70% of these fraudulent COVID unemployment benefits went to foreign countries, to Russia, to Chinese hackers, to scammers in Nigeria. And just as one example, back in January, the DoD announced that a man from California pled guilty to running a fake business where he was selling COVID personal protective equipment that resulted in him laundering, get this, Stephanie, $59 million in American taxpayer money he laundered to China. And then they also traced millions to North Korea's nuclear weapons program. And again, this is all COVID relief. And yet Congress, our clown show Congress, could not get their shit together to approve an extension to try and recover $100 to $135 billion at a time when our economy is like not so great, right? And by the way, this same shit is still happening because it happened with the hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina, the same fraud with the recent California wildfires, where scammers are using the identities of actual victims to apply for these benefits, and then they're wiring the money out of the country. So why is Congress doing nothing about it?
See, this is what pisses me off. It's like with Doge, you're finding all of this fraud, and it's great to cut it, to, stop continuing it. But where is accountability? Why can't Pam Bondi go after these people? Like, I just think it's wild. And I think this just proves all of these people in Congress that probably have links to the people that got the money or are being bribed or are being blackmailed or have done it themselves and they're covering their tracks. And I'm just so sick of the freaking corruption. It's ridiculous. So, kind of along the lines with just the corruption and the lawfare and everything else that's gone on over the last 4 years, President Trump is now getting payback against the law firms that committed political lawfare against him. And at first, I kind of rolled my eyes and I was thinking, like, let's just move forward. There's more important things to focus on. But he was explaining to reporters how this did intervene or interfere with the election. And it can't be allowed to happen again. And he's right. Like, if any other person was in his shoes, they probably would have dropped out of the race and it would have changed the future of this country. And so, I think it's good that he's kind of putting some things in place and calling out these law firms. I mean, it went against the will of the people in attacking the leading political opponent in a presidential race. And I don't think we can just say, like, oh, well, and move on. So he signed a few executive orders, which would basically block these firms from entering federal buildings, revoke their security clearance, and block federal agencies from using their services. And so, of course, one of the orders was already blocked by a judge. And this was an order that was targeting Perkins Coie, which is the law firm that has ties to Hillary Clinton, that was used in the whole Russian collusion hoax against Trump during the 2016 election. But some of the other law firms are proactively reaching out and saying, hey, like, you don't need to go that far. We'll work with you. Let's make a deal. So there was the firm Paul Weiss, which is offering $40 million in pro bono work for causes that the Trump administration supports. And then on Saturday, Trump announced another agreement with Skadden Arps Slate, Meagher and Flom, LLP, regarding a series of actions that Skadden is going to take, including they're going to provide a total of at least $100 million in pro bono legal services to causes that the president and Skadden both support in relation to assisting veterans and other public servants, including members of the military, law enforcement, first responders, federal, state, and local government officials, and ensuring fairness in our justice system and combating anti-Semitism. And then the other thing that Skadden committed to doing is funding no fewer than 5 Skadden Fellows each year, which will be dedicated to assisting veterans, ensuring fairness in the justice system, like all the things that I just listed. They also are committing to merit-based hiring, promotion, and retention. So they're not going to engage in illegal DEI discrimination and preferences. And then they're also agreeing to not deny representation to clients such as members of politically disenfranchised groups who have not historically received legal representation from national law firms. And so the statement from Skadden executive partner Jeremy London says, quote, Skadden is pleased to have achieved successful agreement with President Trump and his administration. We engaged proactively with the president and his team in working together constructively to reach this agreement. The firm looks forward to continuing our productive relationship with President Trump and his admin. We firmly believe that this outcome is in the best interest of our clients, our people, and our firm, end quote.
So basically, they're admitting guilt, and this is their way of making reparations.
Yeah. They're like, we don't want this to go to court, so we're just going to do $100 million in pro bono work.
Oh.
Yeah. So I guess that's a win. And then, let's see, Elon Musk. So the other day, he pinned a post on X, which is a video from journalist Savannah Hernandez. And she caught Jackson Hewitt employees coaching illegals in New York City on how to get up to $14,000 in tax refunds, even if they've never worked. So listen to this clip that she posted.
File your taxes and we can get the maximum refund for your family. And the paper says that if you have one child, you can get over $7,000 in a refund. And if you have up to 3 children, you can get over $14,000. So the Jackson Hewitt employee who initially handed me this paper, after finding out I was a journalist, took the paper away. That's why this one's so dirty, because a migrant ended up giving me another copy. And he stated that if he's put on camera and this goes out, that legal will have to get involved.
But like our company, this is why we try to help people by, providing them with refunds,
So you guys are trying to help the migrants with their taxes then,
Yes.
to help them get refunds, help them get some money back from the government.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Can't put my footage.
Can we take one of your papers, though, just so we can kind of... Thank you.
Actually, you should just take this one because this one has my office information.
Okay, so there, like, the guy is realizing she's a journalist, and he's like, yeah, you can't use this footage. You can't take that paper. How crazy is this, though? They're already getting all these all this funding and healthcare, and then these people are helping them get a refund? Like,
How is that legal? How is that fucking legal to give tax refunds to non-taxpayers?
right. Exactly. So Elon posts this clip and his response was, quote, IRS refund fraud payments are one of several means used by the Democratic Party to attract and retain illegal immigrants in the USA. That's why they're so opposed to DOJ stopping this. The Democratic Party is aiding and abetting fraudulent government payments to illegals in order to establish a permanent one-party majority nationally, just like they did in California. I think that's well put. Like, this is fraud. This is like knowingly committing fraud, and they're just doing it out in the open.
And this is one of the major tax companies. So I think DOJ needs to do an investigation on Jackson Hewitt.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Doge, did you see Elon Musk did an interview where he brought the leaders of Doge, which I think was a really good idea because you know how we've been talking about he has all these young people and people think, oh, like it's just these like 20-year-olds, but these were all like very reputable people. There was a rocket scientist that is literally pausing from like designing rockets to help with this. And so I think it was good to show like all of these very credible people that are behind what Doge is doing.
Well, I think Elon even recently said something like, Doge is getting close to being done. And then when they're done, like he's done and he's going to go back to, SpaceX and everything else that he's doing. And like, it's like the good deed, cleaning up the government and then go back to your real job.
Yeah.
So anyway, you brought up California and fraud and illegal migrants. So I have a story for you, Stephanie, and I have to thank my mother for this one because she sent me this article and she still lives in my shit show home state of California. And not only is Newsom continually running the state into the ground, but he's using federal taxpayer dollars to do it. So first I want to play this clip from Rep. Kevin Killy. He is the Republican congressman from one of the areas in California.
This is one of the biggest scandals that we have ever seen in California, is that our governor, Gavin Newsom, is literally bankrupting Medicaid, or Medi-Cal, as we call it, because he's enacted a policy that exists in no other state in the country. We are the only one of the 50 states that provides free Medi-Cal to every single person who is in the state illegally. They initially said, okay, this will cost a few $1 billion. They have now revised that estimate. The price is up to $9.5 billion just for this year. And as a result of that, the governor has now, number one, taken out an emergency loan in order to just make payments through the end of the month. And number two, asked the legislature for billions more dollars. And if you project this over a 10-year time horizon, we're talking about it went from $3 billion to $9.5 billion this year. How many billions is it going to be for the next decade? Probably.
So he's talking about how this impacts California taxpayers, but it's not just California, because what they're doing is they're providing health care for illegal migrants using federal money paid for by American taxpayers from states all throughout the country. And the way they're doing this, they're not spending the state's own money because it's some shady ass shit where the additional costs are passed on to the insurers who are then reimbursed by the federal government because California has the system set up to trigger automatic federal payments. So this is crazy. And according to analysts at the Economic Policy Innovation Center, the way they've done this could bring in over $19 billion in federal funding by 2026. Stephanie, this is basically Medicaid money laundering. And since California's Medicaid system, which they call Medi-Cal, it now includes 1.6 million illegal migrants. And as he was saying in the clip, the state cannot afford to cover the costs. Newsom is now requesting another $6.2 billion in federal loans. So Totally fucking insane. This is literally money laundering. And on top of this Medicare fraud, Newsom is also requesting a $7 billion bailout for the fucking failure high-speed rail project that has been going nowhere for the past 20 years. And Kevin Kiley, however you say it, he's speaking out about this too. And he's also introduced legislation to cut off all federal funding to completely end this rail project. He's not the only one. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is now investigating the high-speed rail project to, quote, determine how exactly federal dollars have been used and whether federal support should continue. So Duffy said that out of the $15 billion that has been spent on this unbuilt rail system so far, $2.5 billion of it was from federal funding, and there's still $4 billion that has been given to California in federal money that hasn't been spent yet, that is now under review. And so we've talked about this many times. None of the actual high-speed rail track has been built, like literally none of it, despite the fact that the total cost of this rail system has now exceeded over $100 billion. And this project was initially supposed to have been completed 5 years ago by 2020, and it was supposed to cost around $33 billion, but now it's over $100 billion. Nothing has been built. And Duffy said it's actually closer to $130 billion. And again, not a single track of high-speed rail has been built. It's a total fucking sham. It's a complete waste of taxpayer money, like pretty much every project in California. And I guess over the weekend or on Friday, Duffy did an interview with the Washington Examiner where he said that California's high-speed rail project is the complete opposite of a model for others. And he is not opposed to high-speed rail. He's actually in favor of it. But he said, quote, I want to invest in good projects. The liberal mindset who wants this high-speed rail, you would think they'd want to do it really, really well, and they do it like shit. And the question is why? I don't know. You should try to sell people on your ideas, not make them go, these are black holes where people get rich and projects don't get built. California doesn't have the money, and I can't imagine the DOT is going to send them additional cash. They don't even have a time frame of when this can be completed, end quote.
How much needs to happen before the people of California wake the fuck up? I mean, how does over $100 billion just go missing? The Governor Blagojevich back in the day in Illinois, I think it was in 2008, he went to jail for like 14 years or was sentenced for 14 years for way less than $100 billion being stolen. Like, this is absolutely insane. And then imagine you're one of the people that lost your home and you now see like all this money going to illegal migrants. He can take out loans for billions of dollars to help them and to help build a railway. But sorry, you lost your home and everything, and you know we're not going to help. We're going to just take that land and make a smart city.
Yeah, and then the mayor is going to threaten you that if you don't buy into her cleanup program, then they're going to put a lien on your property.
Unbelievable. There's a lot of people that think that California is going to flip red, which I think is kind of, I don't know, far-fetched. But then I was listening to Steve Hilton. He was on, I think it was The Morning Wire. And he was saying when you look at the actual numbers of voters, it's like close to 46% that are voting on the right and are more moderate to right-leaning. So he's like, everyone thinks this is like such a deep blue state, but really it's pretty divided.
You said Steve Hilton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He just wrote a new book. It's called Califailure, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. And I need to order that book because I want to read what he has to say. I read a couple articles of him being interviewed about the book, and it sounds, everything he says, I'm like, yep, I can totally relate to that. Like, California is a fucking shit show. And it used to be like the ideal state that everyone wanted to move to was California. And now it's like a complete shit show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what he was talking about was his book. And he was saying, when you look at registered Republicans, he's like, you really have to look at this middle group, and they had a certain name for it, but it's basically like independents, because he said a lot of those people are Republican, but they're too afraid to register as a Republican because the state is so crazy. Like they don't want to hurt their employment or be canceled or anything like that. But he thinks there's a real possibility that it could flip red. So with stuff like this happening, I don't know how it can't. Like, I don't know how people can just go along with this unless they're just completely ignorant to it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this article that he did. He did an interview with the Daily Signal, and I guess he moved to California in 2012. And so, like, he's raised his family there and everything. And he said, California means to America what America means to the world. But that's not how it is today. We're not known for the positive things that inspire people. We're famous for apocalyptic scenes of wildfire, dystopian urban chaos and crime, and thousands of homeless people wandering around like zombies, which
Yeah,
is absolutely true.
it's so sad.
It really is. And it's sad because I talk a lot of shit about California and I grew up there. I lived there for 30 years of my life. And it's incredibly sad to see what has become of that state. But I was not one of the diehards that wanted to stay there. So I left. But anyway, getting back to Elon, I wanted to talk about the whole, Tesla nonsense because apparently Saturday was a national day of action in what is being called the Tesla Takedown movement. And apparently there were hundreds of demonstrations held outside of Tesla dealerships across the country this weekend. And even my mom was telling me about one in her area in California. And I guess this movement is primarily being led by the Action Network. And we've talked about this network before because they're the quote unquote nonprofit that supports all the crazy left wing causes. And I'm pretty sure they were the ones that were involved in all the insane climate justice protests. And so in response to the protests against Elon and Doge, which is really what these people are protesting. It's not even fucking Tesla. They're protesting Elon and Doge, and they're doing it through, destroying Teslas. But now we have counter protesters who are demonstrating in support of Elon. And I just kind of went down the rabbit hole of a bunch of these local news articles in different cities throughout the country. And I read a lot of the comments from protesters on both sides. And I think one of the best things I read was an article in the Epic Times where a guy on the pro-Tesla counter-protest side, he said, quote, "How are you going to get me to come to the other side just by wanting me to hate all the time?" And Stephanie, this is what you and I talk about frequently. Like the left has become the party of hate and everything they do is with violence. And I do, however, think it's interesting with a lot of the comments I read, and this might just be the media spin on things, but they're portraying it like the country is super divided because we know we have the typical Soros funded protesters and they're common with all of these left-wing protests. But I did read comments with a lot of older people, a lot of veterans, people over 55 who are quote unquote normal, and they're worried because of all the cuts that Doge is making, which is understandable if you're following the narrative being fed by the MSM, which is that everyday Americans are getting fucked by this downsizing of government and the fear that it's going to affect Social Security and the economy and all of that. So it seems like a lot of people who are protesting are actually in support of the government being downsized, but not the way that it's being done.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that the counter protesters are not being funded.
Right. Yeah, of
But
course.
the ones firebombing and like everything are, and they were actually given scripts to read. Did you see that?
No.
Oh, there's all these pictures and videos going around where the people who are protesting Elon Musk are given scripts of like what to say, what to chant. Like it's so, you could just tell like it's funded, it's organized, they're being paid. But I really believe that the majority of Americans are happy that fraud, waste, and abuse are being cut. And I think that's why Trump's polling is better now than it was ever before, even on election day. And I was listening to Senator Marsha Blackburn, and she was saying, like, these are 80-20 issues. 80% of Americans want Doge to cut out fraud and corruption. They want secure borders. They want to keep men out of women's sports and locker rooms. And they want all the woke stuff, the DEI and everything to stop. But that 20%, they don't want that. They're full of hate, but that is what the media machine is going to focus on. Like, that's what they're going to do to try to paint this narrative that, oh, everyone hates Elon Musk and we have to get rid of Doge. And most of that 20% aren't actually young people. Like, yeah, those are the paid activists that they're hiring to go firebomb and stuff. But it's actually the boomers that they're the only demographic that didn't move more right, because I think that they still look at the Democrat Party as the same Democrat Party from decades ago,
Yeah.
not realizing how much it changed. And they're not realizing that because they're getting their information from the mainstream media. So if the media tells them Trump and Elon are cutting Social Security and it's going to affect your Social Security checks, they believe it because that's their only source of information. At the end of the day, I fully think the majority of Americans voted for Trump. They support Doge. The young demographic, Gen Z, they're actually the biggest shift to the right. They're like the most conservative generation we've had in the last 60 years. So I think the media is painting this picture and they're trying to create this narrative because they know if they say it enough, people will start to believe it. But the truth of the matter is the Democratic Party does not have a leader. They don't have a clear message. They don't have anything to sell other than hate Trump and hate Elon. Like, if you're full of hate and you're pissed off, we're the party for you. That's their message. And so, I don't know, like, I'm just not buying it. Like, I know there's people upset with Elon, but I'm not buying this whole thing that like the majority of the population is. And these are the same people. These Tesla protesters are the same people that were burning down buildings during the BLM movement. We know that they're getting funding. We know people like Soros are behind it. And I don't know. I'm not buying it.
Well, that's interesting because you mentioned like, the young demographic, how they're the biggest shift to the right. And that was reflective in a lot of what I was seeing with, these articles about the protest, because I mentioned that, it was mostly the older people that were protesting, but most of the pro Tesla, protesters were all young people. So it makes a lot of sense. It's the young people that are being affected the most. And I even saw something the other day. I didn't read the full article, but it was, I think it went viral on social media where this kid like had a total fucking breakdown because of everything that happened during the last 4 years. Like, you can't afford to buy a house. You can't afford to buy groceries, like all the stuff we've talked about. And so, the older people who have worked and they have their savings and yeah, they're obviously threatened by the idea of their Social Security being taken away. But the young people are seeing that the previous administration did fucking nothing but screw them over for the last 4 years. And it's going to be that much harder for them to achieve even, half of what their parents did.
Yeah. And that's where I get pissed with, like, you see boomers on social media that just bitch and complain about the younger generation when they created this reality that we're living in. They voted this in. They're the ones that sat by and allowed all of these regulations and all of this out of control government spending and never stood up to it. And now we're in this mess that we're in, like you said, where I feel so bad for people that are younger than me because their chance to buy a home is like next to zero. I mean, I'm so glad I grew up when I did, because my God, like, I'd probably be living with my parents right now if I were in my 20s. It's just absolutely insane. And, talking about Social Security, they know they're never going to see Social Security, and they're probably never going to have a 401k because companies are just cutting left and right. And yeah, they've totally fucked the younger generation. But this circumstance, these bad times, I think are building a generation of strong people who are willing to speak up and actually have some masculine energy and are going to stand up to the media machine. So
Isn't
good
that
for them.
how, yeah, isn't that how the cycle goes? What's the phrase? Like, what is it? Bad
Good
times.
times make weak men, and bad times make, I forget how it goes.
Yeah. I should know because I've heard Tony Robbins say it like 80 times.
I think Elon Musk says it a lot too.
It's true. I mean, it is. It's basically when things are too good, then it creates bad times. And
Yeah, you
then you
get
have to go,
soft.
yeah, and you have to go through the rough times to make it good again.
Hmm.
And, that's something that Trump has been saying frequently. And that's where the MSM is putting this spin on, like you talked earlier about how he's more popular now than he was when he got elected. And everything I'm seeing in the MSM is the opposite about how his approval ratings have dropped and people don't like the way he's handling the economy. And, his whole tariff program is going to bankrupt the country. And, so that's what these people are seeing if you're only paying attention to the MSM.
Yeah, and that brings me to something else I wanted to mention really quick because I'll see like something on TikTok, for example, and I always like to do a quick search to just get like the left side because when you do a search, the only thing that's going to pull up are left leaning outlets. This week, pretty much anything that is favorable to the Trump administration, when I do my search, like I always do, and I click on news, it'll say, like, try searching another topic. It will not give one thing regarding the topic that is supportive of Trump. It's like they are actively wiping the internet of any articles that go against this left-leaning narrative. It's
Yeah.
so ridiculous. So it makes me just not want to look at anything that any media outlet is doing. I don't want to give them any energy.
And yet I look at it because I'm like, oh, we need to counter this shit.
Yeah.
So I looked at that quote. It's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Yeah, it's the cycle.
Yeah. Okay, well, I got to switch gears here because on Friday, remember you mentioned how Elon was giving away $1 million to random Wisconsin registered voters who signed the petition to oppose activist judges?
Hmm.
And then, as you predicted, this was immediately followed by a lawsuit, and it was filed on Friday by Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul. But surprisingly, on Sunday, Wisconsin Supreme Court unanimously rejected Kaul's efforts to block Elon from handing out this money. And considering that this whole issue is pertaining to a vote about the future of this particular Supreme Court, which holds a liberal majority, I was actually surprised that they rejected it. And this issue is actually a lot bigger than I realized when you were talking about it on Friday. And I started reading a bunch of articles about it over the weekend because I was curious, like, why is Elon throwing so many millions of dollars at this particular race? And I think there was one article that put it best that I was reading in the Daily Mail. And it was talking about how it was likening how this race is really a race between Elon and George Soros because of the money that's being thrown at this. And it's all for this one open seat in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And so Elon's given something like $20 million, or not him specifically, but like the PACs he's associated with. And then George Soros has thrown millions at it. And like, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, there has been more than $73 million spent on this race, and not just from Elon and Soros, but from other GOP and Democrat mega donors. And that makes this the most expensive judicial race in history. So the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel is predicting that it could total $100 million by the time the election is over, which I think is supposed to be tomorrow. And this is completely insane to throw this much money at a local election. So why is this race such a big deal? And why is this much money being spent for a state Supreme Court seat? Well, from what I understand, like, the left currently holds a 4-3 majority in the Supreme Court right now. And technically, Wisconsin's Supreme Court race is nonpartisan. So there's no like R or D next to the names when you go to vote, but everybody knows who the liberal candidate is and who the conservative candidate is. And the Republican, quote unquote, candidate is Brad Schimmel. And he's a county judge and former Republican Wisconsin Attorney General, and he's being openly endorsed by Trump. And then you have the Democrat candidate who's also a county judge, and that's Susan Crawford. And she used to be an assistant state attorney and chief legal counsel for the former Democrat Governor Jim Doyle, and she's being endorsed by Obama. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because whoever wins will be elected to a 10-year term that begins in August. And it's not just about Wisconsin state politics. And the New York Post explained this the best. And the article said that the Wisconsin Supreme Court is going to be ruling on challenges to congressional districts where Republicans currently hold 6 of the 8 seats. But if they end up approving redistricting, it would give Democrats 2 extra seats in 2026, which could end up giving Democrats control of the House and Congress. So that's a pretty fucking big deal. And so this state court election has the potential to impact the direction of the country as a whole because we have such a slim majority in the House right now in Congress. And so Elon campaigned last night in Wisconsin, and like I said, the voting takes place tomorrow. So looking at this in the context of how it affects the whole country, now it makes sense why both sides have been throwing millions of dollars at this election.
It's just crazy to me, like how much Elon gets involved. Like, it's so stressful even looking at it because it's like he is on top of everything. But this is where I think the Republicans are constantly falling behind is with campaigning. And, I think you need someone like Elon to step in there and bring awareness to this because a lot of people just think like, oh, well, we elected Trump, so we're good. But it's like, no, there's a slim majority in the House that could change. And I'm glad that he's on top of it. But speaking of voting, House Rep Elise Stefanik is rejoining the House GOP leadership instead of becoming ambassador to the UN. And so she actually had bipartisan support and she would have been confirmed. But since the Republican majority in the House is so slim, they need her to stay in there to ensure that Trump's agenda goes through. Like every single count vote matters, And this is what I was thinking about since the beginning. Like we can't afford to lose any House seats, especially someone like her that's played such an important role in the House. So I feel bad for her, but at the same time, I'm glad that she's not messing up anything in the House because it's too slim to start bringing people into the cabinet that need to be voting.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, depending on how this Wisconsin race turns out, it could totally flip things. And so, as much as, the MSM is talking shit about this whole thing with Elon, it's bringing people's attention, like mine, because I didn't know what the big deal was with this race. And now it makes sense. And if the MSM wasn't, talking trash about Elon spending this money and trying to sue and all this other stuff, then I wouldn't even know that this was all going on. So you know what? Keep talking shit. So speaking of talking shit, we have to talk about Greenland because Trump is totally not backing down from his ideas to take control of Greenland. And he did an interview with NBC last week where he totally doubled down on this whole thing yet again. And he said that we will get Greenland 100%. He said it was vital for international peace and strength and security. And I was going to play a clip of Trump, but I found this other interesting clip from CBS News. And this was a reporter interviewing people in Greenland and kind of talking about JD Vance's trip to Greenland last week. And I kind of like how she interviewed people from both sides and she paints the bigger picture. So listen to this clip.
President Trump says the United States needs Greenland for international security. The president insisting that the U.S. must control the semi-autonomous Danish territory. He made those remarks from the White House while Vice President J.D. Vance visited a U.S. military base in Greenland and said that Denmark has underinvested in the island's security. Vance's trip was cut short and his visit was limited to the military base after Greenland and Denmark protested the visit. Holly Williams is in the capital, Nuuk, where the president's territorial ambitions have left some people shaken.
Good morning. For months now, President Trump has been talking tough about taking control of Greenland as U.S. territory. But yesterday here in Greenland, Vice President Vance used a much more conciliatory tone, saying, quote, "We do not think military force is ever going to be necessary."
The Bidufik Space Base is America's northernmost military outpost. The vice president used his brief visit there to play up how Russia and China could threaten Arctic security.
A lot of people are making a play. We know that America cares about the security of this island.
The U.S. base is vital to America's missile defense systems because if Russia ever targeted the U.S. with ballistic missiles, the shortest route would be across the Arctic. President Trump has said he wants to take over Greenland for security reasons, and yesterday he repeated his territorial ambitions.
We have to have Greenland. It's not a question of, do you think we can do without it? We can.
The president's refused to rule out using force, leaving many here in Greenland angry and anxious.
Is this just a normal visit by an American leader to a U.S. military base?
I don't think so.
Vivian Motzfeldt is Greenland's foreign minister and told us she wants cooperation with the U.S., not domination.
You just don't take over. You speak and you talk. That's all politics is about.
Sounds like you're saying you want respect.
We want respect, yes, of course.
I mean, it's 3 times the size of Texas.
Trump's supporters are rare here, but one of them is Jorgen Boasen, a bricklayer.
I ordered it on the internet.
He believes what President Trump really wants is a deal to build more military bases in Greenland.
He's not evil, man.
You also think he doesn't really want Greenland to become part of U.S. territory?
It's about negotiation tactic. This is because he's a businessman, so I trust him. He's a good man.
Greenland's foreign minister told us they're open to talking about having more U.S. military bases here. And it's possible that President Trump's tough talk is simply a negotiating tactic, demanding more than he really wants. Because yesterday, Vice President Vance said he's confident they can, quote, do a deal Donald Trump style. For CBS Saturday Morning.
Do a deal Donald Trump style. Stephanie, what do you think?
Did you ever read his book, The Art of the Deal? I never did.
No,
Like,
I didn't.
It was a book, yeah, back in the day. And what that guy said is what a lot of people are saying on TikTok, which they're like, he doesn't really want to take over Greenland or to take over Canada. He's putting something so extreme out there so that they can negotiate down to what he really wants. So by putting this like wild thing, it's like they're going to be more willing to come to the negotiating table and work with whatever it is he wants, whether it's more military bases, resources. And I think that sounds reasonable and that sounds like something a businessman would do. So I think that's just part of this negotiating strategy.
That's what I think too. And again, like, you know, we're seeing what they want us to see for the most part with these interviews. And you could tell by the reporter's tone that, you know, she was not really Trump supportive. But I do like that she interviewed someone who does support Trump and tried to present both sides. And then yesterday, Greenland's recently elected new prime minister, Jan Fredrik Nielsen, he posted on Facebook, like I guess maybe they don't use X there, but he said, quote, "President Trump says the United States is getting Greenland. Let me be clear. The United States won't get that. We do not belong to anyone else. We determine our own future."
Okay, so I have to bring up what I'm seeing on TikTok with Canadians. I haven't been seeing anything with Greenland. I don't know if they have TikTok or not, but it's kind of similar, you know. Canadians are hearing like, oh, Trump wants to make us a state or whatever. Well, I don't know what the hell Canada's propaganda machine is doing, but all of a sudden, like in the last couple of days, my feed has all these Canadians. And like there was one girl and she was saying like, this message is for President Trump. Please don't bomb us. It's not our fault. We hate the politicians here. You can go after them, but please don't hurt the people. And in the comments, everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what propaganda are they feeding you? We're not going to bomb you. Like, we love Canadians. And then there's like this other girl who she's like, we travel to the United States every year on vacation and we just don't know if we should go. It's too dangerous. And everyone's like, come on over. We love Canadians. Like, it's going to be a great time. And so I don't know what the media is telling them, but they're like making it sound like America wants to just like take down the whole country or something. And it's freaking a lot of people out because I've never seen anything like that. I mean, there's always been some back and forth rivalry, but not to this extent. They're like terrified that something bad is going to happen to them.
Yeah, and a lot of these places have censored media, and Trump does say a lot of crazy shit. And for him to say, like, with Greenland, like, we're going to get it 100%. If you only hear that one clip and you don't hear it in the context of the whole conversation that he had, and he also, said he wasn't ruling out taking it by force. Again, if these are all taken out of the context of the entire conversation, it does sound like we're just going to fucking run in and take over Greenland and we're just going to swoop in and take Canada. And so I get where these people are coming from because I'm sure they are only seeing what their government wants them to see.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's just interesting. I'm like, I would love to get a news clip from what they're saying because it's these poor people are terrified. And here, obviously, we're just like, yeah, it's just Trump. Like, this is the way he negotiates. He is saying that, but he really means this. And yeah, that could be a big deal on a global scale. So maybe he needs to tone it down a bit.
Yeah.
Well, never a lack of news. But yeah, that's what's going on for the start of the week. We'll see how it progresses, and we'll see everyone back here on Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in.